Welcome to Sneak Preview. I'm your host, James McGrath Morris. This program is produced by New Mexico Writers, a not-for-profit organization committed to supporting and connecting the literary community in the Land of Enchantment. Here, authors, poets, and playwrights and others have agreed to share with us work that has not yet been published. In other words, a sneak preview. With us today is novelist Johnny D. Boggs, winner of a record 8 Spur Awards from Western Writers of America. Booklist magazine ranks him, quote, among the best Western writers at work today. A film historian, he's also the author of Jesse James and the Movies, Billy the Kid on Film, 1911 to 2012, and the forthcoming Sports on Film. In 2020, Boggs received the 2020 Owen Wister Award for a lifetime contribution to Western literature and was inducted into the Western Writers Hall of Fame. So Johnny, what have you brought for us today?
I'm working on another film history. This is called, working title is American Newspaper Movies of the Sound Era, Depictions of Print Journalists and the Fourth Estate. And it's for McFarlane. And this is just the introduction, how I came to write the book. I actually, as a former newspaper journalist, I think I've decided to write this book because, for one thing, I wanted to get away from writing about Western films. And also, I was kind of sick and tired of listening to someone in the previous White House trash newspaper journalism as fake news. So this is kind of an introduction. I walk into the employee entrance at the Dallas Times-Herald, nod at the guard, and ride the elevator to the 4th floor, where I get off to enter the newsroom. Only I'm not in the newsroom. I seem to be in a darkened movie theater. Passing seats on both sides of the aisle, I realize that I must have gotten off on the wrong floor. As I head back to the elevator, the people in their seats stay focused on the screen. I turn to see what's holding everyone's attention. Dead bodies line a table. A man in surgical gown and mask steps forward and dumps acid onto the corpses. Acid eats away the flesh of the dead, turning the bodies into skeletons. I wake up. Don't even try to go back to sleep. I never would have had that nightmare on a summer night in 1985 if not for All the President's Men, Call Northside 77, or Lou Grant. Not because those movies and TV series scared the living daylights out of me, but they inspired me to start a career in daily newspaper journalism. It was the only work-related nightmare I ever had. Just more than a year out of the University of South Carolina's College of Journalism and Mass Communications, and a member of one of the last graduating classes from the All the President's Men School of Journalism. I was 23 years old, working for a Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper with a circulation of more than 200,000 daily and more than 300,000 Sunday in one of America's largest cities. Back then, the Times-Herald competed aggressively for circulation and scoops against the larger, richer, the Dallas Morning News a few blocks away. Hired straight out of college as a sports writer, I was being transferred to the downtown sports copy desk after a year working in the suburban Arlington bureau. Shortly after 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time on Friday, August 2nd, Delta Airline flight 191 flying from Fort Lauderdale, Florida to Los Angeles, California, crashed while making a scheduled stop at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport. A typical summer thunderstorm had rolled in, and wind shear, the term which soon become commonplace, forced the Lockheed L-1001 TriStar to the ground more than a mile from the runway. As the jet pounded across Texas State Highway 114, the left engine slammed into a Toyota Celica, instantly killing the driver, William Mayberry, on his 28th birthday. The Lockheed crossed open ground and onto airport property, struck one water tank, then another. The tail section separated from the rest of the fuselage. The rest of the airplane all but disintegrated in a massive fireball. 137 people were killed, Mayberry, 8 crew members, and 128 passengers. Miraculously, 24 passengers and 3 crew members survived. It was the first major airplane crash at DFW. Usually sports is the last to wrap up for a morning newspaper, but on this night, sports got out of the news department's way as quickly as possible. I went home, watched coverage of the disaster until about 2:30 a.m., and woke up to the ringing telephone around 6:30 Saturday morning. An assistant news editor was calling in all available hands, And when you're making $315 a week, overtime sounds good. On deadline that evening, the lead reporter told me to call the medical examiner and find out how many bodies had been recovered. I made the call. Dr. Charles Petty, who had worked the John F. Kennedy assassination 22 years earlier, wearily said that I could not quote him, but we don't know if we have one body in 10 body bags or 10 bodies in one. Ever the reporter, I asked if I could attribute his quote to an anonymous source. No. Adamant, he went on to explain that the families of the deceased were coming into Dallas and that reading what he had just told me was not something they needed to see in the morning newspaper. In later statements to the media, however, Dr. Petty was quoted saying pretty much the same thing he told me. He died in 2007 at age 86, and I don't believe he would mind me putting him on the record more than 30 years later. While writing this introduction, I asked dozens of newspaper professionals about running this quote, and the consensus was, after all these years and considering Dr. Petty's later for the record comments, I am not violating his trust. Besides, we know the name of Deep Throat from all the president's men these days too. Anyway, I never forgot what Dr. Petty said, but it was a message about compassion that struck me more than the ghastly description of the casualties. I would recall that lesson many times later when copy editing or writing sensitive articles, but I've never forgotten that nightmare either. When I write that I'm from the All the President's Men School of Journalism, I mean this. With the success of the best-selling book by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein and the Academy Award-winning film that followed, both detailing the Washington Post reporting on the Watergate break-in and cover-up that led to President Richard Nixon's resignation, a record 50,000 students enrolled in university journalism class schools. Why? Henry T. Price, retired as journalism professor and dean of the College of Journalism and Mass Communications at the University of South Carolina, explained, because it was inspiring. Those who were practicing journalism, those who were preparing themselves for a career in professional journalism, and those who thought they might want to become journalists, and those who taught these people all found themselves invigorated because here was something that proved the truth of a phrase all of them knew, but perhaps only a few had ever experienced: the power of the press.
That's a terrific introduction to the book.
Thank you very much.
I'm a journalist and loved every minute of it, and I know journalists will love it too. Terrific. Well, thank you, Johnny. Folks, tune in again soon for another installment of Sneak Peeks previews. Even better, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. And to learn more about New Mexico writers, be sure to visit our website, nmwriters.org.